All right. Hi there, everybody. This is Tracy, Amplifi's Marketing Manager. I want to thank you for joining us for our Ask the Experts webinar, discussing leveraging the power of dynamic lists and workflows to drive process efficiency with Salsify. As you know, when registering for this webinar, you had the option to pre-submit questions, which we will be answering today. Thank you for all your submitted questions. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to everyone by the end of the day tomorrow by email. During this presentation, you have the ability to submit questions through the Q&A feature. However, due to limited time, the complexity of our scenarios, we will follow up after with your answers, making sure that you get the attention that you deserve. Without further ado, let's get to know our experts. First up, we have Ametra Tipton. Ametra is the Salsify practice lead here at Amplifi with years of experience working in the MDM space. Ametra is responsible for driving new technology platforms to not only understand feature functions, but also how to solve client use cases, leveraging new partnerships, as well as the internal enablement of delivery and sales for new platforms. In addition to her duties as a practice lead, Ametra is the principal consultant responsible for successful deliveries across Amplifi's portfolio. Prior to joining Amplifi, Ametra held the title of solution consultant as well as quality assurance analyst at Stevo Systems. She also has experience working in the information assurance industry from her time as a senior solution architect at NCC Group, where she focused on pre-sales, engagements, and delivery. Next up, we have Chris Colyar. Chris Colyar is the Chief Technology Officer at Amplifi. He has been designing and implementing PIM MDM projects for 10 years, starting out first working on the software vendor side and later transitioning to the consulting services side. While his background is rooted in software development and architecture, years of implementations across a variety of markets, industries, domains, and technologies has changed how he views success. Chris's primary focus now is working with the team at Amplifi to understand business users' goals and bringing them to those goals through incremental successes. All right, and Chris has a few points he wants to cover as far as Salsify is concerned, so I'll hand it over to him.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. So today the topic is going to be specifically around workflows and lists in Salsify. So we wanted to make sure we gave a little context in case you were newer to the ecosystem or you were just hadn't used these functionality in your instance yet. So just real quick, workflows, it's very similar to workflows that you may have used in other tools or process flows or business processes, those kinds of features. At a really high level, it's just used to direct product data as it flows through the system. But really the goal within the Salsify tool is you want to direct the user to action at a certain point in time, maybe on certain specific data points, or to make decisions, or even have these workflows trigger rules. So it's really the life cycle of the data in the system. We can structure that with the workflow, and you'll see a little bit of examples of that. And then the lists in Salsify, at its barest level, it's used to organize your products so that you can keep track of them, which would be similar to a save set or a collection or other features that you might have in other software suites. But Salsify has a very unique view of lists. Presence on a list is a characteristic of that product that can be used to drive behavior. So in Salsify, it goes beyond just being a user-facing tool, and it's actually a pretty powerful system tool. And you'll see a little bit of that and how that can be used. And the one last call out there is when we talk about lists, we'll make a distinction between a simple list or a smart list or dynamic list. And Ametra will be able to give you a little bit of a view on what that looks like. But with that, we have a lot of great questions, so I'm going to pass it back to Tracy, and she'll introduce some of the discussion points. Thank you.
All right, question one. How can we filter which products are sent to a workflow?
That's a great question. So the way that we're going to filter which products are sent to a workflow within Salsify is using the list functionality that Chris just described. It's really powerful. So now I'm going to actually jump right into Salsify so everyone can see what that looks like. So now I'm actually in Salsify. So there are going to be 3 lists that we're going to be focused on during today's session. So the first 2 that we're going to be taking a look at are going to be our webinar products and our new products. So as you can see, one of those is our simple list, and one of those is going to be a smart list. So first, I'm actually going to jump to my products view so we can see what the filtering actually looks like in the tool. So after I clicked products and view all, you can see that our total of 29 products that live in our sandbox were brought up. I'm just going to apply a really simple filter, and then we'll manually add those products to our webinar products list. Right. So after I clicked add filter, we can see we got a new row here. So this is where we're going to actually define those requirements. So based on the data points that live on our products, we'll want to add those to our list. One thing I really love about Salsify is the UI. So you guys can see as soon as I hit that drop down, all the products all the properties that exist within our instance were displayed. So when we think about properties within Salsify, a good way to correlate that to our product data is just the attribution. So where does the data actually live for our products? Okay. So I'm just going to type status there. That's going to be the property that we're going to filter on. So it defaults to equals, but of course, if I hit that drop down, we can see that Salsify has quite a few different ways that we can work with our products, but we'll stick with equals. So I'm going to go ahead and select new. One other thing to point out when I'm filtering my products is that you can see that Salsify actually makes suggestions. So based on the data that exists in the system, they're giving the users a little bit of guidance about what to do next. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and select new. And as you can see, I only have 2 new products in the system. 2 new products are represented by a status being set to new. All right, so after I click actions, we're going to actually add our products to our webinar products list. Remember, that's our simple list. All right. So after I hit actions and add to list, I do get another dialog window. So with this add products to list window, it's going to allow me to either create a new list or use an existing one. We're going to use our existing one. So now that we've selected the list that we want to manually add these products to, I'm just going to simply hit add. And we can see here that the system does give me some feedback and say that 2 products have been added to our webinars products list. So now we're going to jump back into that list just to confirm. All right. So now we're looking at our webinar products list. This is our simple list. So we just manually added these products. So as Chris mentioned with our simple list, these are going to be the lists that our users are going to primarily be interacting with. So if we would just think about an easy way of putting a collection together of our products based on the data that lives in the system and the filtering process that we just went through, I can add and or remove items manually from a simple list. So the thing to keep in mind is simple lists are really for our end users. All right. So now that we've covered simple lists and what that process looks like, let's jump into that smart list I referenced earlier. So now I'm actually just going to navigate to our new products list. Right. So I do want to show everyone how this is actually defined. So I'm just going to simply hit the bolt in the drop down and we'll see an option to edit. Right. So this view looks very similar to the one that we just did when we filtered our products to add them to our simple list. So you can see here, we have the same requirements. So we're simply saying that for our products that live in our instance with a status set to new, we want these to appear on our new products list. Now, the best part about this list is the system handles the burden of adding and removing products. So that means if I get a new product come into Salsify and it has a status of new, it's going to go on this list. If I have a status change for that same product, it'll be removed from this list automatically. So that's really useful. So now I actually want to put this to the test by creating a new product. So let's see what that looks like. I'm just going to jump right back into my products view. All right. So after I bring up my product screen, I'm just going to select new product and then we'll enter some pretty basic product data into the system to get us going. All right. So here we'll put a name for our product. So 100% juice cranberry mango is going to be the product that we're going to be using today. We're going to grab our identifier, and then we're just going to select a level in our taxonomy for our product to actually live. Pretty straightforward, we'll go with beverages. And I'm going to actually click create. Okay, so you can see here after creating that product, I'm brought to the actual product details screen. So we know that we're going to be using that status property to be driving our product through the workflow today. So I'm going to actually manually update my product just so it has a status of new. As I'm sure many of the people that are on the webinar today know, when we're going through the onboarding process, it's not always ideal to be in the system, the PIM system, creating these products manually directly. So it's worth noting for sure that Salsify does support the integrations with external systems that contain source data for organizations. So we could picture this item actually flowing into Salsify automatically with all this data enriched, including status, but we'll do it today. All right. So now I'm just going to go ahead and set my product status to new. And then I'll save that change. Okay. So now we can see that we just updated our product status. So now let's actually dive into the connection between our smart list and our actual workflow that we're going to be looking at today. So I'm just going to click more here, and then I'm going to navigate down to our actual workflow option. So the workflow that we're going to be looking at is going to be our NPI workflow, or our new product introduction. So I'm just going to bring up the workflow modeler. And as you'll notice, the workflow modeler within Salsify is really clean and really easy to follow. So of course, now that we've gone forward and put our actual products onto our list, let's see how we're going to drive the initiation into the workflow using our new product smart list. So I'm just going to simply click this gear icon and it'll bring up our actual configuration. So here you can see that clicking the gear on that initial task for our workflow start expanded a right panel here. So as you can see, not a lot of clicks and changing of screens as I'm working through the system. So this is pretty straightforward, saying that our workflow is going to start here. And you can see that we already have that configuration in place to be based on the new products. So I'm going to click this pencil icon and we'll bring up the details behind that. Okay. So for point one, our number one requirement is of course going to be actual list membership on our new product smart list. So that essentially means we're only going to be looking at products that live on that list. And based on those products that live on that list, what do we want to actually do? And what's going to be the trigger? So for us, it's going to be the addition of a new product to that list. So as you just saw me manually create the product and add a status of new, that would trigger the system to place that item on our smart list. And from there, based on that new addition to our smart list, it should be initiated into our workflow. But first, let's confirm that that product is now on our list. So I'm actually just going to exit out of the workflow modeler and go back to our new products list. Right, so if you'll recall, the name of our product was 100% juice cranberry mango. So we can see that it's now on the list. So that's a smart list at work. Now we know the second half of that is it's been added to our list. So let's actually jump into our workflow. And you can probably already see that I've gotten 2 notifications for our workflow. That means that it's in there and there are some tasks ready to be worked. So let's get to that. So I'm simply just going to hit this icon here and we'll jump right into our new product introduction task. Okay. So here I'm on the task view and we can see that these are my tasks, meaning that based on my user group, I'm getting an assigned task for our workflow. So we'll see that our product is in here right now for 2 new tasks. So now that we've actually walked through the process of what creating a simple list and creating a smart list is, and also seen that functionality at work, by automatically placing an item into our workflow, I really hope the audience takes away the power of lists within Salsify. They're really powerful, obviously, to not only drive systematic engagement, but of course, end user engagement as well, as I was easily navigating back and forth between all those lists. Something that we do ask that customers keep in mind when they're utilizing Salsify, because the lists are so cool, is that we just manage those lists, right? So just think through the change management processes that go into managing your PIM system and keeping the number of lists under control and clean and tidy for your instance. All right, now that we've covered the initiation into a workflow, let's get to our next one.
All right, thank you, Ametra. All right, question 2. How can we control which items a user sees in the workflow?
That's another really good question. So the same way that we're going to be taking a look at our items based on that assignee field is going to be the way that we filter our actual product. So let's get right back into the system and see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm still here on my task list, and I'm just going to scroll over a bit to the right. As you can see, we do have 2 tasks. So it's definitely worth pointing out because this is a common use case that we come across. There are times when there are going to be multiple groups that need to be working on the same item simultaneously. So Salsify does support parallel tasks. So that's why you see that I have 2 tasks on my list for the same actual item. And when I scroll to the right, you can see that the assignee for each one of those is actually different. I'm a member of both those groups for the purposes of today, but just imagine within your actual organization having your merchandising group being able to work on items solely around the data that they care about, and then being able to have compliance or maybe another sort of group that needs to enrich their data at the same time with no dependencies on one another. So that's a great feature too. So now that we can actually see the assignee field, let's see what it looks like when we're working in our workflow modeler. So I'm going to jump right back into my workflow. So now that I'm back in my workflow modeler, you can see here that those 2 parallel tasks that we just got assignments for are merchandising enrichment and nutritional enrichment. So I'm actually going to click the pencil icon for our merchandising enrichment. So once again, when I click that pencil icon there for that task, we're going to get an expansion of that panel on the right side of our screen, right? So right here at the top, we can see that this is going to be our product enrichment task, if you will, and that means that it's manually driven, right? So we actually have users in the system hands-on keyboard. So for us, we can see here that we have an assignee parameter, which is actually required for all of our tasks. So it's set to static, which solely means anytime a task actually, or a product needs to have the merchandising enrichment task fulfilled, it'll always go to our merchandising group with this configuration. So that's really straightforward. In addition to setting assignees as for user groups, we can also do that for end users that we have in the system as well. So I'm just going to click this drop down here, and you'll see once again that Salsify really can present all the data that's in our instance in a really consumable fashion. So I don't have to go to another tab to say, oh, what groups do I have in the system? What is their ID? I can just simply hit the drop down for what parameter I'm trying to set, and it's right there. So now I'm just scrolling down. You can see after I've gone through my actual user groups, it gets to my users. So I could set a user for this assignee as well. So that's really useful. So now that we've taken a look at how we can actually set that assignee, I do want to go back to our task list and actually enrich our product. So I'm just going to scroll right back up, and I'll just go to my task. Right, so let's tackle the first one, which is our merchandising task. So I'm going to actually click the hyperlink here, and you can see that we have the actual name of the task as described, and then we have our product name. So with the expansion of our right panel for this task, we can see that we're only going to be enriching 2 attributes today. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to put in a description for my product. And then I have another property called the fast track flag. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this to yes. And then I'm going to mark it as done. As you can see, the description property for me on this task is actually required, and that's represented right there with that red asterisk. And once I populated that field, we could see that our mark is done, or our submit button, if you will, was highlighted for a user to click. So we're going to do that. All right. So another thing that's really good about Salsify is the immediate feedback from the system. So you guys just saw how I clicked that mark is done button, and then it's brought up the actual completed status for my item, as well as some logging saying where it was assigned to and who actually worked it with a timestamp. And not only that, it actually gives me what fields I updated as well. So I think that's pretty cool. So we just completed one part of our parallel task. I want to actually jump to the next one so we can get that done as well. So let's simply pull this one up. And we're just going to enter one simple attribute value here for our nutritional info, and then we'll move forward. So same thing there, where we're getting that feedback from the system. And I think that's just great functionality there when you can see that I didn't have to click off of the screen. I'm still taking a look at the same view, still on my task list. So the system's really guiding the users with how they should be interacting with the workflow, which I think is extremely helpful. So with multiple business units interacting with item data during the onboarding process, making sure that the tasks get assigned to the right users is really critical. So Salsify definitely takes care of that. Great question, and I think we're ready for the next one.
Awesome. Great job. All right, next question. All right, question 3. Are you able to send notification for a workflow?
Absolutely, you're able to send notifications for a workflow within Salsify. So what I'm actually going to do is pull up an email that I actually just received from the system, and then we'll walk through how we went about configuring that. So as everyone can see, we got an email from our Salsify workflow simply stating that we had a fast track product created for our 2020 summer campaign. So it gives me a pretty descriptive subject there, as well as some information about my product, including my identifier as well as my name. So after we get past the subject, we can also—
Ametra, go ahead and share that email. I'm not seeing it.
There we go.
Thanks.
There we go. So we can see that we have our fast track item come through via our email. And we have our descriptive instructions on what this actual item is. So our fast track product for our 2020 summer campaign with our ID and our name there. And then we also have in the body of the email, the name, as well as some instructions for our user. So let's actually look at how we configure this within our workflow. So I'm just going to close this email. And I'm going to jump right back into our workflow. So bringing up our new product introduction workflow, you can see here that after our merchandising enrichment state where we set that fast track property to yes, we have an email bot. So I'm going to actually select this. So for our email bot, you can see that there are a couple of parameters that we have to configure, but it's all very straightforward. So simply scrolling down, you can see that I sent that email to myself, as well as if I wanted to have a reply to, a name, etc. But for the actual information that we did see in the email, we can see here that we have our subject. So the beginning of that subject was just some static text. And after that, we actually have some different properties that live on our product that we're able to define for that subject. And then of course, the header being our product name and the actual message that we want our marketing user to receive, so they'll know that they need to go in and enrich a fast track item. So when we think about this kind of process within an onboarding scenario, There are cases sometimes where there's going to be a new product launch, but maybe the product was held up during some initial conceptual phases or a lack of approval from various groups, so on and so forth. But we know we still really want to launch this product for summer so our consumers can enjoy it. So with this, we're simply just notifying the groups that play a role in our process later down the line that they need to go ahead and work as fast as possible. Of course, that's not ideal. So we always recommend utilizing things like email notifications for a lot of exceptions and sometimes more rare cases, solely because we all know being flooded with a lot of emails is no fun and eventually you start ignoring them. So we don't want our users to be receiving a ton of email and ignoring them when we need them to be participating in the onboarding process. In addition to email, it's also worth noting that Salsify does support other forms of communication integration. So from a workflow, I could also be sending notifications into Slack, which I know is embedded into a lot of organizations. So that's really good to know as well. Functionality like this is extremely helpful and efficient for some workflows, right? So when we talk about those cases where I know I want to push something through urgently, this could be a really critical piece to that. All right, I think we are good to get to our next one.
Great, thank you. So question 4, can we use workflows for automation?
Awesome. So before we jump in with demonstrating a common use case, I just wanted to briefly go over the breadth of available automation. There's actually a lot that can be done. It's a pretty open-ended question. So just real quickly, within a Salsify workflow, there's a lot of different triggers, like that email bot that you saw. One common one is Salsify webhooks. So this allows a workflow to configure a small JSON payload and invoke an external HTTP service. And then the flip side of that, Salsify has an API that can be invoked from external services. So we can actually have system interactivity happening as part of a workflow. Formulas, which is a template. If you've used Salsify, you've probably used formulas. It's a very robust template evaluation. So you can actually do complex data manipulation within a workflow triggering. And this can execute some business logic. You might be doing conversion of data, replacement of certain key fields, formatting, pattern matching. Basically, you're taking one or more fields and evaluating business logic within this templating language. Workflow routing conditions. So you don't need users to automatically figure out what the next steps are. You can actually establish some formulas to choose directions so that your workflow might call on the right user when that exception and condition exists. You already seen workflow initiation and smart lists, but don't just think of it as one workflow initiating from one list. There's some interactivity that can happen between workflows and lists. So we can actually use the combination of that to make data opportunities discoverable, so that users are now being conditions that have been defined are being promoted to users to then take action on outside of the scope of just a single static workflow like we've been working. And then obviously there's the ever blanket yes. If you ask Salsify, can you solve this use case? They would say yes. They do have customizations that they deliver to customers. I came up with some pretty contrived scenarios of, can you make a workflow do this? And the answer was yes. And when we dug into it, worst case, it was a customization. And sometimes they were even able to expose the direct JSON configuration of some of these bots. So I could do some crazy stuff myself. So with all of that, there's a lot of opportunity for automation and workflows. But I want to send it back to Ametra. It's a really great question, and it makes me very giddy to talk about the fun automation stuff. But Ametra is going to finish her story in the demo, showing where one of those pieces of automation could fit in.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, we do want to see what that automation looks like within Salsify. So I'm going to be sure to share my screen this time. All right, so now that we're back in the tool, the last place that we left off with our item was actually in our marketing enrichment. So if you recall, we're doing the fast track scenario where we want our marketing team to get in there and wrap up their task really quick, right? So we're going to continue to push our 100% juice cranberry mango through our MPI workflow. So now I'm just going to simply go here to add an image. And the audience should be noting that similar to properties and the way that Salsify can suggest different values for attributes, It can do the same for assets as well. So I actually have a couple that exist in the system. And in addition to that, of course, I could either pull a local file from my laptop or even utilize a URL. So if you're utilizing something like Dropbox and you just can quickly paste URLs into the system, that's very useful. But we're just gonna select our 100 cranberry mango image for our main image, and then we're going to put in a marketing copy. All right. So now that I've gone ahead and I've enriched both of my required properties, I'm going to mark this as done. So our marketing task is complete. Okay. So now that we've had our users actually go through the process of entering the data that they own, we're going to jump into our review and approval process. So this is typically going to be what we find at the end of our onboarding. So we've had our merchandising group enter their data, as well as our compliance team with all the nutritional things that is really important for our products. We want people to know what they're drinking and eating, right? And then we put in our marketing information. So now we're in a scenario where we probably have a team lead for merchandising that just wants to give the product a once over and stamp it for actual approval. So I'm going to jump into the please review and approve task. All right. So as you can see, I have a panel here and it's simply just asking me if this product is approved by management. So I'm just going to take a look at all my products, give them a quick once over. Everything looks good to me. So I'm going to say that we're good to sign off on this product, right? And keep in mind that we still have a status of new, right? So we're not all the way done with this product, but we're almost there. So I'm going to set this to yes. So now that I've set that to yes, we're good to resolve this. So something else that we should be taking note of is that Salsify simply presents me with the ability to leave a comment. I don't have to go through a lot of extra configuration or headaches to enable this. It simply just pops up as part of my workflow process. Still there and integrated within the same screen. All right, so I'm just gonna say looks good. And we'll mark this as done. So now that we've transitioned that from our team lead, it's always good to probably have someone maybe in a director position or really going through the process of being really thorough with this data if we want to have another set of eyes on it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and click on my final review task and we'll see what that looks like. So as you can see, I've transitioned our 100% juice cranberry mango product through our MPI workflow. And not only can I still see all the details for my product on the same screen, when I look at my right panel, I can also see the comment that was left by my team lead, as well as the approval stamp from management. So I think this looks pretty good. So we'll click our select task resolution. So you'll see once I click that, I did get a pop-up to say if I want to approve it or do I actually want to request changes. So this is a reflection of a really common feedback loop that we see during the onboarding process for products. There may be a case where I've gone through and I've actually reviewed some products, but there's something that I want to see updated or altered, or maybe just something that I have some general feedback on that I think would make that product data a little better. We have that capability within Salsify as well. So that's probably been seen by a lot of different organizations, commonly referred to as an approval or a rejection. But for us, our product's perfect, so we're gonna go ahead and approve it. All right. So you can see how easy this UI is to use. I just simply selected that radio button there to approve. It's gonna give me the ability to create a comment as well as the final task in our workflow. So I'm just gonna say, great job. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna resolve this. So now that we don't have any more user tasks, I want to go back to the workflow modeler so we can see what role automation is playing in our workflow today. So I'm just gonna select more from my dropdown and I'm gonna jump back to our workflow view. So now that I've selected my MPI workflow, I'm actually going to zoom out a bit just so we can see what the bottom of our workflow looks like. And that's really what we just completed. Right. So we just walked through the enrichment for marketing, as well as our team lead review, and then our final approval. But here you can see at the bottom that we have something that's called our product edit via formula. So I'm going to click on this bot so we can look at the configuration. So we can see here that we have a task within the system that we're calling our product edit via formula. I'm going to scroll down a bit, and you can see that the task configuration is actually utilizing a formula within Salsify. Once again, worth noting that this is all on the same screen. I don't have to define the formula somewhere else and then reference it here. So I can actually do it right within the workflow modeler, which I think is great, and actually still have visibility into what my flow looks like. So this one's a pretty straightforward formula. It's very simple. We're using our status property. So that was the property when we kicked off the onboarding of our new product. We set that to new. But what we want to do now is, since we've completed our actual workflow and our product's been completely onboarded, we want to actually change that status to active. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to exit out of our workflow view, and we're going to check a few things now that we've updated the status of that product. So I'm going to scroll back up, and I'm going to actually click this products option here. So you can see there are two lists that we covered when we kicked off, but we also have another list, and it's our active products list. So much like our new products, this is a smart list. So that just means that when the products within our instance have a status property set to active, they're going to live on this list. And of course, if they're not active, they won't. So I'm just going to click active products. But first, let's actually confirm that our product has been removed from new products, since that's where it started. So you can see that we had our product when we first started our workflow process, living on this new products view. But since it's been pushed through our workflow and actually completed it, it's on a new list now. So let's take a look at that one. So now we can see that we've updated our product using our product edit via formula bot on our workflow. And it actually updated the status of our 100% juice cranberry mango from new to active. So when we think about the actual onboarding process, statuses can really drive a lot. So if we obviously have completed all of the work to enrich our product and it's ready for consumers, that means we're probably going to have to syndicate it to different retailers and push it to downstream systems. A really easy way for other systems, as well as Salsify, to know where that data should be going and how to treat it is to use a status. So with this property, we can obviously allow our users to engage with the data differently. They know that, hey, this is an active product, so if I update it, it has different repercussions than if it were just new, so on and so forth. I hope everyone understands the power of automation in the workflow, so let's get to the next one.
All right, sounds good, Ametra. Question 5. What are some of the challenges that you see governing product data within organizations?
All right, so this is a really broad question. So we're going to give a really broad answer, but I actually really like this question. We're going to be a little more strategic on how we approach it. But Salsify has actually made a lot of advancement in the past year in adding governance functionality in order to move PXM a little further upstream in organizations, so that Salsify can serve as a product master, so that it can enforce governance and kind of become that one-stop shop for data management. So challenges for if you're an existing Salsify customer, you're not really comfortable with data governance, the concept, you haven't really done a lot of implementation, and now you're looking at starting it and using some of these tools. So some challenges, the first would be the constant battle between structured master data and then flexible market data. So when we look at master data, it's factual, transportable, foundational data elements that you have about those products, and it's the truth. There's no other way to interpret it. But when we talk about the market data, that's really more contextual. It might be channel specific to recipient systems needs, and it's how do you take that factual data and then drive revenue from it? So there's this push-pull between those. So that relationship, as you're starting down the governance track, it's going to be difficult to define, and you have to be a little comfortable with the fact that it will evolve. So there are some table stakes about factual elements that you must establish, and you have rules and ownership, and it's very tight. But then you do want to empower your end users that are interfacing with the consumers or your customers to make sure that they have the ability to succeed on whatever their KPIs are. So, they want to gain market share. They want to drive more revenue. So they need to have the flexibility where it's feasible in order to do that. So greatly dependent on where your organization is, but that push-pull between the factual master data versus the flexible market data is going to be a challenge. The next one is measuring performance impacts on your decisions. So it's a little bit of a pendulum when we go into an organization that has not been using governance or has not had a clear view on how to apply governance. And then there might be some excitement generated, some articles read, and they're gung-ho for data governance. But then we might swing the pendulum too far the other way. And then we lock things down and we kind of paralyze the organization. So, we have to be able to measure the impact of the decisions. Are we getting the benefits? So we applied governance to solve a problem. Are we getting the benefits from the governance changes we made? If we are, great. Why? And if we aren't, why not? We need to answer the question and understand why anything's happening. Is the cost of implementing it, is that in line with our estimate? Maybe we were okay slowing the process down by 1 day, but are we slowing things down by 2 days? Is that okay? Why did it slow down more than we thought? We have more people doing approvals. Do we need more people doing approvals? So we want to continually evaluate the effectivity of the decisions we made. And then as soon as we're answering these questions, we should then be building a backlog of what are we going to do next? So we've got costs, we've got benefits, we understand the whys. So there's obviously something else our organization can be doing to do better tomorrow. So let's continually evaluate, are we going to do something new, do something more, do something different, go backwards a little bit because maybe we're going down the wrong path? That's all okay, as long as we're doing it for reasons that we've understood from measuring the performance of our governance decisions. And then the last big bullet would be making sure we're getting people involved correctly. So that, that the easy part of that is, okay, well, are the data owners involved with defining what this process looks like? Whether they like it or not, they need to be involved. But it's a little more subtle than that. It's realizing, not just you, but your organization realizing that governance can be a necessary evil. So I liken it to if you're in the industrial space, industrial safety. If you're in the IT space, you have IT security. It's these departments that they're really, you go to sit down and log into your computer and it says, oh, your password's, it's 90 days. You need to change it again. You've been here for 30 years. This is the 300th time you've done this. You forget it, you reset it, whatever. And so, at that point, you're probably cursing IT or your industrial safety. You walk into, down the stairs, you have to hold the handrail. And if you don't hold the handrail, you might get cited for failing to comply with safety standards. So you might think that's annoying, but really that's for your safety. And governance kind of has the same connotation. Is you might find it annoying in the restrictions that are happening and the audit trails that are created and the approvals that are necessary. But a lot of the times it's to serve the greater organization. You're reducing risk, you're gaining visibility, you're making sure things are up to the standards that you want. So that's a big part of getting people involved correctly is helping people understand that you know the costs involved and you've accepted it, and that they know the benefits involved so that they can be part of driving to that solution. And then the last little one of getting people involved correctly is making sure that you are continually engaging the community that's impacted, that you have shoulds and shouldn'ts published, that you owners are known of the data elements, systems are known of the data elements, that decision points within the life cycle of data at your organization are well understood. You can't do governance if everybody's in a vacuum within their own system. It's got to be this holistic approach. And that you have playbooks for exceptions, because Ametra's example of fast track, sometimes things are going to happen and your organization can't say no when the market is demanding change of you. But what's your playbook for when that does happen? Who needs to be involved? And how are you going to, once you come through that, how are you going to fix the exception that you made? Does it become a rule, et cetera? So I think at a high level, those are some good things. It was a structured data versus flexible data, making sure you're assessing the impacts of your decisions, and then getting the right people involved. So it's a really great question. I hope, that shines a little bit of light on what some of the challenges that you'll face would be as you start your governance walk. But let's go to the next one.
Okay. So question 6, what are common mistakes and what can we proactively do to avoid them?
All right, so the other question was a little broad and we took a strategic approach. So this one's a little broad, but we're going to take a very tactical approach. So because we're talking about workflows and lists, we're going to talk about some common mistakes that we want to avoid when we're starting our journey with lists or workflows. So the first one is everything isn't instant in a workflow. So Ametra very creatively worked around the fact that with some of the triggers she did, they were triggered instantly, but really we're just registering it for the backend system to process, and it might take a few seconds. So the screen might not immediately update with the status change, or an email might not come out the second you click submit. So we just want to make sure as we're defining these processes and workflows that we're not making with the same user a process flow contingent on the exact same user doing something, triggering data, reacting to their own trigger, etc. So knowing that while it is near instant, it's not instant, and if you expose that to a user in your process, you might frustrate them. So try to bulk the work together, batch the uses together, batch your automation together. That way, users are called to act when they need to act, and they're not waiting on that non-instantaneous process. Another one is workflows are pretty safe and easy to play around in. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but we have 10 workflows in our instance where we're just going in and checking different bots and, okay, how do we work with this scenario? So you should do that in your instance too. We encourage it, Salsify encourages it. So not only should you not be afraid to try working with workflows, if you have a workflow, you should review to see if it's accomplishing your goals. It's a powerful tool, but we want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. Salsify themselves, they have stories where overly complex workflows start to harm the process, kind of like our governance discussion. So are you getting the most out of your workflow? Is it achieving what you want? And then also look at what features are available in the workflows. Maybe there's a bot there that you didn't know how it could be used. So start exploring, keep an eye on knowledge base and documentation, talk to your customer champion. What else can you do? Because you always want to keep things as optimal as possible for the value you're going to get. Another one is a couple more. Lists in workflows, they don't actually work with workflow statuses. They used to with the legacy statuses, and this is actually not a huge gap. You can do, Ametra did the exact thing that we would recommend, which is you use a property like an active flag to then drive a list. So now your workflow status is registered to the product can drive a list. But just because you say, oh, I can't have a workflow drive a list, you might be thinking, oh, that's a gap, but you can solve that yourself. And then the last question, or the last tactical common mistake, is making sure you're using the right list at the right time. So, a smart list, you cannot remove something from it. You can't just go into a smart list and say, I want to remove you. It has to be removed systematically based on the criteria failing to be met. Conversely, simple lists can't be automatically updated. They have to be curated manually. If you want to remove something or add something, you have to go to that list and remove it or add it. Now there's an asterisk there because the API does allow you, so an external system could add something to a list, but so we want to make sure as you're defining these lists, what are those lists going to be used for? And then make sure we pick the right one for the right time. And then lists can refer to other lists as participation. So you actually can have a smart list that populates based on something having gotten added to a simple list. It can only go that way from smart to simple. So that is a possibility depending on your use case where you can actually chain a couple lists together so that you're able to start building the solution for data discoverability. So those are a couple of the key pitfalls we've seen in lists and workflows. So it's a great question, and I love that you're asking it. We actually love to build and share our experiences with like a knowledge base internally to make sure that these things that might not necessarily be painful could be jarring if you bump into them unexpectedly. So, all right.
Great. All right, so question 7. What do we need to know about suggestions being made that differ between the basic workflow functionality versus orchestration module?
All right, this is another good question. So The orchestration module, if you want to look more about it, it's actually in the knowledge base. It's referred to as enhanced workflows. So you can go look it up. But at a high level, what it does is it adds a level of dimensionality to workflows based on some property values of the products. So you can create these assignment lists that based on a given product's property value, you want to assign that to a group or to a user. If you wanted to say a product of a certain category should go to this merchandising user, and then based on that assignment to that merchandising user or that property of the product, these fields are visible, these fields are required. So it gives you this very fine granularity on the user experience. So we see a lot of value for larger organizations with large user bases that have very segregated roles across the product portfolio. In a standard workflow, you're a little more coarse-grained. You would have to build the different tasks in yourself, route accordingly, maybe have different workflows. So it really becomes a decision you have to make. The orchestration module or enhanced workflow, it is an add-on to your Salsify instance. So if you are interested in it or you want to explore the use case further and see what value you'd get out of it, we'd encourage you to talk to your customer champion. They would be able to give you more specific information on how you could feel it out and see what the benefit is to you. Very great question. And a last note on that one, I love this question because it goes back to one of my earlier comments on making sure you're regularly reviewing how you're using workflows and are you using them optimally. So whoever asked this question, they've already checked that one off. So that's awesome.
Great. Chris and Ametra, is there anything you'd like to add before we start wrapping up?
Nothing for me. Ametra, do you have anything?
I did want to just make sure that we tackled 2 questions that we got from Sherry before we did our wrap up. So Sherry wanted to know on one of her questions is, will you get a separate email for every SKU, or is there a way to batch them? So Sherry, there is a way for us to batch our notifications. So Salsify does support having a daily digest. So the way that this works is that we can send an email to a user to update them on the task that they have. So in that example that we did for the fast track marketing, based on how frequently we're sending those digests, that could work as well as an alternate way to batch those products as opposed to that single mail that we covered. So there is a way to batch those and make sure that our users are in the loop. And the last one that I wanted to tackle from Sherry before we get our wrap up from Tracy is around if we can add comments when we're not approving products. Absolutely. So when we went through that final review, if I were to say that we needed to send that back to our team lead because the work wasn't sufficient, we could absolutely add some comments there to give them a little bit of direction. Of course, letting the system play communicator with that one, as opposed to emails, chats, and things that can get lost offline. So Sherry, I hope that those answers are sufficient for you. You're good to go, Tracy.
I did have one more comment. Just some context. Earlier when we talked about governance, I made mention to some of Salsify's advancements as they want to move PXM upstream. We do have a white paper coming out next week where we actually explored some of those new features and how we can apply them to the product master side of the equation. And then there's also a blog coming out soon that talks about that relationship between the flexible data and how important it is and how it butts up against the product master data, so that rigid operational side. So do look for those coming out in the next week.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, as a thank you for attending this Ask the Expert session, we are offering a complimentary one-on-one follow-up session with an expert to answer your specific questions if you have any, aside from the ones that we already covered today. This expert session allows you to have that special attention with an industry professional to help you with your most difficult pain points. If you're interested in taking advantage of this one-on-one session, please respond to your follow-up email tomorrow, and we'll be happy to get you started. We hope this webinar gave you the opportunity to see what our company has to offer. Let's continue the conversation on how Amplifi can help your business with our MDM strategy and consulting services. You will receive your recording by email tomorrow. Keep an eye out for more Ask the Expert sessions, and we'll be looking forward to being your resource. Have a great day.
Thank you.